Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm Tahina from the Pagny Health and Research Foundation. Welcome on this almost sunny afternoon to Grand Rounds this week. Our subject today is strength, not stress. Shift from what's not going well and have what you haven't accomplished to what you have. Next slide. Some housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be archived on the foundation website under events and programs section in the next few days. We will have questions and comments after this presentation, so you can always feel free to unmute or type your questions into the chat room and we will read them out loud. Please sign in for attendance to claim any CME, CE through the EEDS text messaging method or the website portal using the sign-in code provided in the next slide. After completing the evaluation, you will receive your CE. So sorry, I'm having a speaking issue here. Okay, back to focusing. All right. So this week's program is a 69 LEAD. The sign-in methods are text code to 828-295-1144. And Dr. Gazelle has no relevant financial relationships to report in the last 12 months with a commercial interest. Next slide. Join us next week again with Dr. Gazelle for Don't Run on Empty, Understand How to Fuel Your Tank. And the week after that is another one with Dr. Gail, Leave the Vortex of Negativity by Building Realistic Positivity. Next slide. I think we'll go ahead and launch into the program with Dr. Gazelle.
Thank you, Tahina. It is a complete pleasure to be here with all of you. And really, I want to thank each of you for taking the time out of your busy day to attend this session. So what we're talking about today is strengths, not stress. And what I hope to do in our 30 minutes together is to talk a little bit about why strengths are so vitally important for building your resilience. I'll also talk about self-compassion and how that relates to focusing on our strengths as opposed to our weaknesses. And then I'll lead you in a very practical exercise so that you can get some experience and practice actually applying your strengths yourself. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dr. Gail Gazelle. I'm a former hospice physician, and about a decade ago, I pivoted in my career and became an executive coach for physicians and healthcare leaders. I'm also a certified mindfulness teacher, and then I'm the author of Everyday Resilience, a practical guide to build inner strength and weather life's challenges. So when you see this slide, we see a tiny little person, probably maybe a 2 or 3 year old, sitting there thinking, well, gosh, maybe can I lift this massive multiple 100-pound weight? And it's interesting because although he looks a little sad, he's not sure if he can lift it or not, he's actually willing to give it a try. He's willing to lean into his little person's strengths in the service of reaching a goal, of maybe shooting a little bit higher. And when we think about resilience, as I talk about in my book, each of you has resilience within you. In fact, it's my view that everyone does, and that we have resilience in the form of a deep inner well of resources, of strengths, of courage, of fortitude, of so many capacities, much wisdom and goodness. And how do I know that you each have this within you? Because each of you has weathered difficulties. The difficulties are part of the journey for all of us, aren't they? We don't get through life without dealing with complexities, challenges, obstacles, small and large. So I know that that's true of all of you. And the fact that you are still standing tells me that you have been able to connect your inner resources with what you need externally so that you can thrive and get through the difficulties that you face. And that's what we're working on today, how to lean into the strengths that you have, how to know that that they're there, and to actually take the time to apply them to the difficult situations that you face. Now, I'd like you to meet my dog. This is Miss Sydney. She is very connected to her strengths and accomplishments. You can't see it in this picture, but she catches that stick or a ball, and gosh, her tail is just waving wildly. But for many of us, especially in difficult times or if we're on the verge of burnout, we become disconnected from our strengths and accomplishments. And so I want to pose a few questions, and I want to encourage you to put your replies in the chat because I know that they will be helpful for everybody on this call. So the first question is, do you see your strengths or your weaknesses? In other words, is your lens kind of focused on what you're doing well and what you're accomplishing or what you're not? So just think about that for a minute. Is your lens more focused on your strengths, like the canine, or is it on your weaknesses? And I see one person has already written more on the weaknesses. So just take a moment to reflect. And if you're comfortable putting that in the chat, we'd love to hear from you. So many of us are more focused on our weaknesses. We get to the end of the day and we do an inventory of what we think didn't go well. We don't focus on what we did do well and what went well in the course of the day. And I'm imagining that this resonates for many of you. We further get into bed at the end of the day and we ruminate about what remains to be done on that ever-present to-do list. And sometimes we even awaken during the night, don't we? Fretting and ruminating and worrying and fearful about how we will get it all done. And so when we can lean into our strengths, it can actually help us bridge areas that we are not quite as strong, otherwise known as weaknesses. So that's, again, what we're getting some practice doing today. Now, a further question along these lines is, what is your typical ratio of self-affirming to self-critical or self-defeating messages? Now, what do I mean by that? I think we all know what the self-defeating messages are, right? Comparing ourselves to others, accusing ourselves of being an imposter, for an example, thinking others are smarter, more compassionate, more talented in one way or another. Those are the obvious ones, the self-critical and self-defeating messages. Self-affirming, gosh, I'm doing a good job here. Okay, I may not be the smartest in the pack, but you know what? I got a lot of smarts and I've been applying them and will continue to apply them. Self-affirming, I'm doing the best that I possibly can, particularly in this difficult time of the pandemic. So if you think about that for a minute, is your typical ratio of self-affirming or self-promoting to self-critical and self-defeating, is it 10 to 1? Is it 1 to 1? Is it 110? Okay, 1 good thought to 6 negative. I think that's true for a lot of us, isn't it? I think it's a rare person in healthcare that has kind of the weighted on the self-affirming and promoting. So just reflect on that for a minute. It's what we learn to do, isn't it? We learn to see how we measure up to others. We learn to criticize ourselves, not necessarily to focus on what we're doing well. And yet that pattern can really contribute to the wear and tear. It depletes our inner well of resilience. And why is it that the mind tends to go to the things that we're not doing well? Well, you can see here in this little comic about the negativity bias. Bad, 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 bad. Bills, lack of time, everything going wrong. And then on the right side, gosh, why can't I stop thinking about that one bad thing when there's so much I should be happy for? Or we might even say, why can't I stop thinking about that thing that went wrong when I was able to help so many people, so many patients, coworkers, my family, members of my community? And the reason is the negativity bias. It has a profound impact on us on a day-to-day basis. It keeps us focusing on what we're not doing well, as opposed to what we are. And sometimes we can also believe that we need to focus on what we're not doing well. After all, if I don't berate myself, if I'm not critical of myself, gosh, I'll just kind of collapse in the corner and never go forward with anything. I hear that all the time from physicians and healthcare leaders that I coach. But I find myself questioning, is that true? Does it really help to focus on what we're not doing well? Does that motivate us to do better and to truly learn from our experience? It's an interesting question, and I want to do a short experiment here. So I'm going to ask you to participate, especially if you're stationary, not if you're driving. But I want you to think about something that's on your to-do list, perhaps something that's been there for a while that you're procrastinating about. It might be getting charts done. It might be some policy that you need to write. Whatever it is, just imagine something that's on that to-do list that you just haven't been able to bring yourself to do. And for the purposes of this experiment, I'm going to be a little bit mean for the next 15 or 20 seconds, so forgive me. But as you imagine this thing on your to-do list, here's the thing. I don't think you're ever going to get it done. You're really not very good at this kind of thing. Other people are so much better at it. I don't even know why you're trying. You just don't really have what it takes to get this done. And, you know, let's let history be the lesson. You're just plain not good at this. So sorry about that, but I'd like you now to rate your level of motivation to get this task done on a 0 to 10 scale. 0 is no motivation, and 10 is I'm ready, let me at it. So just take a moment, rate your level of motivation on a 0 to 10 scale. Now, and this person says it's a 2. You can put that in the chat if you'd be so kind. Your level of motivation. 0 is poor and 10 is really strong. Now, keep in mind that same thing that you've been procrastinating about, but I'm going to switch the frame here. Gosh, you are so good at this task. I am delighted that you're the one who's going to get it done. It's a hard one, and I know you have just what it takes to get this done. You know, sometimes you procrastinate, but that's okay. You always get things done. You have got this. You have exactly what you need to get this done. Now, please rate your level of motivation on that same 0 to 10 scale. And I'm curious whether it changed at all. And if you'd be kind enough to put that in the chat, your level of motivation with the negative messaging, and then your level of motivation with that positive messaging. I do this exercise very frequently in talks that I give, and honestly, it's a rare person who doesn't go up by at least a few points, often by considerably more than that. I've never seen anybody actually go down. And so I want you to really take this in. We can harbor this idea that we have to be harsh with ourselves. Ah, here's somebody who says, I always get my taxes done on time. Okay. Yeah, we harbor this idea that we have to really kind of beat ourselves and whip ourselves. And yet, what I'm talking about is that that is an idea that is worth challenging. And I really want to encourage you to try motivating yourself to get difficult things done by actually focusing on your strengths. And this ties into a field that we're now aware of, a field within organizational development and growth called appreciative inquiry. Some of you may have heard about this. It's often taught in business and leadership programs. And what we do in appreciative inquiry is we try to move from seeing things as problems to opportunities. And for us in healthcare, I think it's fair to say that we're pretty problem oriented, right? We're the fix-it people. People come to us with their health concerns, and it's our job to make them better. And of course, that's laudable. That's what we're all here to do, and it's a wonderful thing. But it can actually leave us stuck in a model of what's wrong and how do we fix it, as opposed to a different model that you can see here. What's working? What's actually going well? What's possible? What are my strengths and the strengths of those that I work with? And how can we harness those strengths to build a bridge to the areas that we need to work on? And along those lines, we can also ask the question, what's going well that we can do more of, as opposed to what's going wrong that we want to do less of? And very importantly, we can go into the future and kind of ask ourselves, well, when I look back on this situation, this difficulty in my work or home life, What is it that I will be most proud of? What is it that I want to be able to look back and see? And this ties into something that you may be familiar with, the idea of a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. And in the growth mindset, we can take on challenges. We can face setbacks, otherwise known as failures, because we know that those are a part of life. Those are actually part of what we learn from. We can also find inspiration in the strengths and successes of those on our team and around us, as opposed to success being somewhat of a scarce resource that we're competing for. And we can also embrace challenge and know that all of our efforts will be fruitful. So that's just an important juxtaposition of these two types of mindset. One very strengths oriented, the growth mindset, and one considerably less so. Now, you may be hearing this and thinking something to yourself, gosh, what's wrong with me for thinking about my weaknesses? What's wrong with me for being so critical of myself? Gosh, am I the one kind of digging myself into a hole? And I want to be clear, we learn these things, and particularly in healthcare, we don't always learn how to lean into our strengths. I see this in physician training, and I know it is true for others in the healthcare endeavor. So I want to just take a moment right now to acknowledge just how hard each of you is working with the recent uptick of cases that each of you is facing, with all of the ongoing demands that you've each been in for such a long time now, over a year. The competing demands of managing the home front, of kids, of spouses, of adult, aging parents that you have to take care of in a different way, of losses that you've had. And I just want to acknowledge how hard this is. Your struggles are shared struggles. You're not the only one. In other words, excuse me, these are the burdens that you and your coworkers and colleagues are facing. And self-compassion is so important because there comes a time when we can't pour from an empty cup. Many of us do that. We've learned to put everybody ahead of ourselves, to barely even put ourselves on the list. Part of identifying our strengths and leaning into our strengths is reversing that pattern and reversing it with what's called a self-compassion break. If it's comfortable right now, and again, if you're stationary, perhaps you can put your hand over your heart, a gesture of tenderness towards yourself. Press a little bit, feel the warmth of your hand there. And perhaps you can repeat these words mentally to yourself or verbally if you're all muted, if you're somewhere where that's comfortable to do. May I be kind to myself with what I'm going through. May I give myself the compassion I need and deserve. May I care for myself just as I would a loved one in need or the many patients that I take care of. May I be patient with myself. This exercise, the self-compassion break, can help us break the hold of a cycle of self-criticism, of being overly harsh with ourselves and overly focused on what we're not doing well, as opposed to what we are. And there's another exercise that I want to walk you through right now to really help you get in touch with your strengths and think about how you can apply them to whatever difficulties you're facing. This Theodore Roosevelt quote can be helpful. The more you know about the past, the better prepared you are for the future. And so what I'd like you to do now is bring to mind any significant difficulty you've experienced in the past. Go as far back as you need to. Could be a challenge of an illness, of training, difficulties in relationships, personally or professionally. Certainly, anything over the past year, it might come to mind. Illnesses, accidents, changes in relationships, financial difficulties, problems with your kids or other relatives, all the difficulties of the pandemic. Just bring one to mind, but it has to be one in the past. And as you reflect on that past difficulty, I'm curious, what resources did you draw upon to overcome this difficulty? To get to the other side of it? Somehow you did. You're still standing. You got through that difficulty, and I'm sure you've gotten through others. What people did you enlist to help and support you as you traversed this major difficulty in the past? And further, what strengths did you utilize, did you pull from and draw from that helped you get through this past challenge? This is a list of just a few for your consideration. Was it your love of learning, your problem-solving ability, your patience, your determination? Was it your innovativeness and creativity, your leadership? Perhaps it was your sense of humor. Again, your relationships and connections to others. Was it your ability to empathize with others? Perhaps it was your courage, perseverance, or sense of hopefulness and belief in the ability to get through. And perhaps it was curiosity, teamwork, or honesty. I just want to encourage you to really think, what strengths did I leverage to get through the difficulty that I'm thinking about right now? You have these strengths within you. I know that. We all do. And you utilize some of these and perhaps others that you want to put on the list. I really want you to think about how you utilize these strengths. And very importantly, now that you've participated in this exercise and you've thought a little bit about how you got through, even if it was imperfect, I want to challenge you to think about how you can apply those very same strengths to whatever the top current challenge is, whether it's something related to the pandemic or otherwise. How can you apply those exact same strengths to what your difficulty is today? And if you'd be kind enough to put something in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself, I think there can be a lot of shared learning in an exercise like this. So often, again, the negativity bias takes us to, well, I didn't do well, I could have done better. Other people knew how to navigate this challenge and I don't, right? That's where our critical mind can take us. And yet, what I hope you're seeing in this exercise is that you do have these resources within you. You do have these strengths. And this exercise is really a way to get in touch with them and think about how you could apply them in new ways to help you today with whatever the challenge is, whether it's at work or at home. It's so interesting, again, the way the mind goes to the negative. Because what I've seen over and over is this paradox. The more we focus on what we're not doing well and what still needs to be done, the more daunting and draining our tasks can seem. On the other hand, the more we focus on what we're doing well, our strengths and our accomplishments, the greater our confidence and energy to actually go out there and accomplish more. I want you to think about that. Again, the normal human tendency to focus on what we're not doing well, and this idea that we can have that we have to do that. If we don't, somehow we won't be motivated. And yet, I really want to leave you with this. I want to encourage you to notice this week. Notice what really does motivate you. If you're somebody struggling to get your charts done, for example, just pay attention. Notice if you're being critical of yourself or harsh with yourself, just do an experiment. See how it's working. And then see if you can reverse that and really think about all the times you have gotten those charts done, as difficult as it was. And even if you got them in late, you do have it within you to get them done. And just notice if you can do that exercise, if you can focus more on your strengths and whether this is actually true for you. You can take an assessment. This is through the University of Pennsylvania Department of Psychology. It's a website, AuthenticHappiness.org. They have a variety of assessments there, and one is called the Values and Actions Signature Strengths Survey. You can go on there for free. That's part of a research study where over 5 million people have participated, and you can learn what your top strengths are. So I really recommend that. And then I have a free resource. It is related to this topic, even if it may not seem obvious, but it's a mini course in mindfulness, 14 days of recordings, less than 10 minutes a day to really help you learn strategies like this in terms of really getting to know your own patterns. That's a lot of what mindfulness is about. And you can sign up for that for free. It's in the chat if that can be helpful to you. Like anything, we need to practice these activities. If the pattern, which it is for many of us, is to focus on where we're not doing well, it's going to take practice. You know, I don't expect you to leave this session kind of magically able to focus on your strengths, but this is practice that is worth doing. So I really want to encourage you to do so. And I just want to thank you again for taking this time out of your busy day for you to invest in yourself. That's what we're doing in these sessions. We're giving you practical tools that you can take away and hopefully try things out real time so that you can really build your resilience and fill your inner resilience well so that you're best able to manage whatever challenges you face. Tuhina?
Yes, hi everybody. It's question and comment time. If you have some questions or comments that you'd like to share with Gail, this is a great time to do that. You can either put it in the chat box or unmute yourself.
And if you would prefer, please feel free to reach out. info@gailgazelle.com is the easiest. GAILGAZELLE.com.
And we have one question about whether you can see the previous sessions, and absolutely we will send you the website where we have all of Dr. Gail's previous sessions for you to enjoy. Yes, and Dr. Moskowitz, yes, we will have this posted in the next day or two so you can see it at a different time. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today and enjoy this beautiful weather we're having. Again, a reminder that the activity sign-in code is 69LEAD, and you have until tomorrow at noon to get your CME. So please fill out that evaluation, and please fill out the evaluation that we'll be sending you as well. We'd love to hear from you and your thoughts about future programs. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.